Welcome to our fifth presentation in our series of the Canadian Garden and Botanical Garden Destinations. This monthly event is being presented by the Canadensis Botanical Garden Society, and I'm Michel Gauthier, and a board member of the Canadensis Botanical Garden Society. And it is my great pleasure to act as your host for this evening presentation. Canadensis, the Garden of Canada, Le Jardin du Canada, is to be a national botanical garden of international caliber set on a 34-acre parcel of vacant land at the edge of the Central Experimental Farm, along the Prince Edward Drive, and also on the Rideau Canal UNESCO World Heritage Site. To find out more about this legacy garden for our community and for all Canadians in our capital, including the vision of Canadensis, how to become a member or how to make a donation, I invite you to visit our website, jardincanadensisgarden.ca. And I'm sure that Kat will have that in the chat box. Should you have specific questions regarding Canadensis, we have put the Canadensis email in the chat area. Otherwise, feel free to contact us at your leisure. Our moderator, Kat Thompson, which some of you have met while we were entering the room, will be managing the chat room and ensuring that questions and comments are addressed. I invite you to insert questions in the language of your choice in the chat box at any time. Located at the bottom of your screen, our guest speaker will answer as many as possible at the end of the presentation. Also, we would love to know where you're joining us from, which you can write in the chat box. And I see that some of you, the regulars, have started doing that. That's great. As well as comments and suggestions that you may want to share. So let me introduce our speaker and our topic for this evening. So Gerald Dieleman has been with Assiniboine Park Conservatory for almost 10 years and is the Senior Director of Horticulture. His role involves overseeing horticulture and the forestry team. In addition, Gerald plays a key role in the development and the implementation of the new leaf, and you'll hear more about that, currently under construction, and the outdoor gardens of the leaf, which open this summer. Gerald will share with you about the gardens at Assiniboine Park and Zoo, his role at the Assiniboine Park Conservatory, and what new garden experience we can expect to see over the coming years at the Assiniboine Park Conservatory. So Gerald, it's up to you. Thank you, and we'll catch up after the presentation.
Thank you, Michel. Hello, everyone. My name is Gerald Dieleman. I am the Senior Director of Horticulture at the Assiniboine Park Conservancy. And so the Conservancy is a nonprofit organization that is responsible for the operation and management of Assiniboine Park, the Assiniboine Park Zoo, and the new leaf, which I'm going to share with you today. So I'm going to switch over to my screen and share our presentation. And I'm going to start sharing with you what I do here at the Assiniboine Park and what my role is and some of the new exciting things that we do here. So first of all, the Assiniboine Park Conservancy the Assiniboine Park is in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And so for anyone not familiar with Canada, Winnipeg, Manitoba is pretty much right in the middle, and we're just north of North Dakota. So if you're not from Canada, that hopefully gives you a bit of a reference. Our team here we have a team of skilled gardeners who are excited about the work we do, and we're happy to share that with everyone who comes to Winnipeg. I want to start with recognizing that today in Canada is a day of recognizing truth and reconciliation with our Indigenous communities. And so that's been celebrated across Canada. And we did that too here at the Assiniboine Park. This is our team who work at the Conservancy. These are our volunteers, our horticulturalists, our zookeepers, our food and beverage team. And we took some time this morning in the fire node, which is part of our new gardens at the Leaf, just to acknowledge acknowledge and just take note of the history of our Indigenous people here in Canada. So a special day here in Canada, a special day in Winnipeg, and a special day in the park for sure. So Assiniboine Park is in, like I said, in Winnipeg, and we're not downtown, we're on the west side of the city. And the park itself is about 400 acres in size. So we are the largest park in the city. And the interesting thing about us is we are a nonprofit organization. So the park, although if you were to visit it, you would feel that you're at a city park, as you should. But we are operated at an arm's length from the city. So everyone who works at the park, myself included, all the people you would have seen in the last image there, we're all employees of the nonprofit organization called the Assiniboine Park Conservancy. And we all have very independent roles within it, just to operate this space, to make it accessible to the public. Within the park, we have a number of different key elements. There's on the western half is our zoo. And then throughout the park, you can see a number of sports fields. This image is from the middle of July, so you can clearly see what parts of our park are irrigated and what parts are not. But again, we function as a park, so lots of open space, and then also a number of gardens throughout the space. To the north of us is the Assiniboine River, and so that's the namesake of our park and facility. So some of the gardens that we have here and that we're responsible for are our children's nature playground. So there's a little bit, and it's funny when I talk about features of the park, I show the garden elements, so I don't actually show the play equipment, but there's a whole playground here. But it's a little bit of whimsy with some topiaries that our horticulture team creates. These are little frogs, or actually quite tall frogs that sort of greet you as you enter the playground. But our team is responsible for keeping this up and running. We operate about a 2 or 3 acre English garden. So this garden is very, very colorful. It's at its peak in August. It's a beautiful space. It's one of the oldest gardens in our park. And again, in sort of an English meandering style is how you would experience this garden. Full of lots of annuals. And we like to push the limits on the perennials and shrubs that we grow here. So even though Winnipeg is zone 3, we are zone 3 deniers, and we try a couple of zone 4s, material here and there. But again, this is the English garden. So a very beloved part of our park. Adjacent to our English garden is what we call the Leo Mole Sculpture Garden. And Leo Mole is a sculptor of relative fame here in Manitoba. And so this garden here has a lot of his work, his sculptures. And so the plant material here is meant to accent and frame the sculptures. So the horticulture team here has a slightly different role in terms of maintaining the plant material. I think in the children's garden, it's all about keeping everything alive with all of the activity and buzz that's happening in that garden. With the English garden, it's all about creating that English garden atmosphere, that look and that feel. Whereas in the Leo Mole, it's all about framing and preserving the sculpture and making this a sculpture garden. So, and in addition to that, we also operate, our horticulture team also works in our zoo. And so we have a number of zoological related projects out there, which would include a butterfly garden, which houses tropical and native butterflies. And so there's lots of activity happening across the park. So the gardens I just showed you or referenced are just sort of spread out throughout the central and western part of the park. But what I want to share with you today and go into a little bit more detail is what's happening in the southeast corner of the park. And that's this area here where my cursor is. Because this has been a very quiet, passive part of the park, and we wanted to encourage more activity in this area, and we also wanted to celebrate horticulture here. So we want sort of a public garden in this space that is a counterbalance to the zoo, which is in the western half of our park, and then the heart of the park area, which is where most of the gardens are, and a lot of in the playground and our duck pond as well. So it's meant to sort of move the amenities across the parks so that there's things to do in all zones. So without further ado, I'll just sort of dive into the gardens at the Leaf and tell you a little bit about what is the Leaf. And it's a series of about 35, this corner of the park is about 35 acres. The area, this is a concept drawing, and the area that I'm showing that's in color here is the new gardens that opened up this summer. What's in gray here is what's still under construction. And what's under construction is the Leaf facility, which is this building here. So if you hear me use the word Leaf, I'm referring to an actual building that's going to be a conservatory. So there'll be some tropical plants and Mediterranean plants and different zones within the Leaf. So that's this blue section here. But I'll share a little bit about that in a little bit. But what I wanted to talk about was these garden zones that you see outside. So there are 6 key gardens that have been opened up to the public. They are a kitchen garden, a sensory garden, a performance garden, a seasonal garden, the Grove, and the Indigenous Peoples Garden. And all 6 of these areas are in different sizes and different scales, and all have different purposes that all relate together to compose what we call the outdoor gardens at the Leaf. So this is an aerial shot taken earlier this year of that area, of that zone. You can see the Leaf under construction right here. And you can see the Indigenous Peoples Garden, which is this area here. Our ornamental gardens, which are right here, and the Grove, which is over here. And so you can see we have these big spaces on either side of the ornamental gardens that are more naturalized, more open. They have pathways for circulation. And then a little bit more activities happening down this central area. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about each of these gardens. So this is a bird's eye view, a conceptual drawing of if you were at the top of the Leaf, the top of the tower at the Leaf, looking down at the gardens. You can see those ornamental gardens through the center. And then on the left-hand side would be the Grove, and on the right-hand side would be the Indigenous Peoples Garden. And this earlier this spring is the same view, except from the building looking out at those gardens. In the foreground is the kitchen garden. In the midground is the performance and sensory gardens. And then in the background is the seasonal garden. So what happens in these gardens, and what are they for? And why did we choose to promote them? The key thing is that these gardens in Assiniboine Park are meant to be community spaces. These are spaces for people to gather. They're meant to be accessible, and they're meant to be meaningful. And one key way to if you're talking about plants and to start having people talk about their relationship with plants, a good way to do that is through food, and to have that conversation of food. In our children's garden a few years ago, one of our gardeners started planting beds full of kale and Swiss chard, and incorporating that into their planting design. And the response we got from families and kids was incredible. Kids were asking, what were these plants? Where did they come from? What are they? What are they used for? Because they looked very different from other things in the garden. And this conversation of where your food comes from became very, very prominent. And so that's something that we wanted to enhance and sort of press forward in the gardens that we have here at the park, and especially here at the Leaf. So in this is the same garden, just a little bit later in the summer, just before opening. And you can see here, this is our kitchen garden. So we have a series of vegetable gardens here. And then our fruit-bearing shrubs have been planted here. This particular part of the garden has a lot of plant material that is good for making dyes and different colors and that sort of thing. The wall here that you see on this side is our Espalier Wall. So although in this image you don't see the fruit trees, but they have been planted. They are starting to grow against this wall. And so again, in the central area, a number of picnic tables, a gathering space for people to come and enjoy and have those conversations about the food that can be grown and where and how it can be done. The next garden in this sequence of space really is what we call the performance and sensory gardens. And so we wanted the garden to be a place of, again, a sense of community, of gathering and celebration. And so one way to do that is we built a small amphitheater in the bed here, or in the ground, with a stage at the center. In the background is our sensory garden. So all the plant material here is relative to your or plays to your senses, whether it's smell or touch or texture, or how the grasses will move in the wind or sound in the wind. All these elements together are what form the sensory garden. And so this space, and again, this is earlier in the season, but you can see the amphitheater here. These are the seats where you would sit. This is the stage. This is the main pathway. This would have extend on the left side of the screen. It would extend to the kitchen garden. On the right side of the screen, it'll extend to the seasonal garden. We have a series of mounds or hills that you can climb up and stand on top and have a good view out across the gardens. If you're not from Manitoba, this might not be as relevant, but here in Winnipeg, it's very, very flat. And so being able to get up and look out is an amazing opportunity. And so that is a key feature for our garden, to be able to get up and look across the garden. One of the key plants in our gardens is the Prairie Crocus. This is the provincial flower of Manitoba, probably one of the first flowering plants here in the province. We have a number of them in our seasonal garden. It's just a strong feature that we like to share and showcase for sure every spring. This is the seasonal garden, and you can see the pathway is extending again from the beginning of the other gardens. This garden here has a different series of pathways. Of course, there's the main pathway that comes right down the middle, a perimeter pathway that gets you around the edge, and then a number of informal pathways that are throughout the garden, where you can sit, relax, and enjoy the space. A water feature in the center, and then again, three little private areas. So because they are circular areas surrounded by cedar, and so what you see is this sort of little rooms within a room situation. The seasonal garden is quite interesting in that it is all perennial material. There are little to no annuals in this garden. And this garden is meant to be a counterbalance actually to our English garden. Our English garden has a lot of annuals where they are very powerful throughout the summer. And this garden has its perennials. There are a series of 12 sort of combos, if you will, that are repeated a couple of times throughout this garden. And so there's combo 1, combo 2, combo 3, and so on and so on and so on. And in this particular image, you can see one of these combinations here starting early, and that's where that highlight is at that particular time of year. And again, all the perennials are meant to sort of have this wave of color, this wave of effect as you come through here at different times of the season. The goal is that if you were to come here in July, mid-July, and then come again at the end of July and then mid-August, that you're going to see different things. You're going to experience this garden in different ways, simply because of the mass plantings and their effect and how they're ebbing and flowing from one stage of the season to the next. One of the other key elements of the project and of the gardens is the Indigenous Peoples Garden. And this is a rendering of the fire node. And so the first image I shared with you where everyone was in their orange shirts was in this particular space. This garden is, and garden is perhaps the wrong word, but this working title of this space, the Indigenous Peoples Garden, is a space that's meant to celebrate the relationship between the Indigenous community and the land. And we worked with a series of Indigenous designers to help us, or actually to take the lead on creating what is now called the Indigenous Peoples Garden. We worked with Dave Thomas, who's an Indigenous designer, and his team, and he led a number of facilitated, I guess, visioning sessions with elders and knowledge keepers and youth, and posed one question, and that is, what is an Indigenous Peoples Garden? And the responses were incredible. And he met with people one-on-one. He facilitated a large gathering, and a number of things came together. One was a space that people felt welcome, that people were acknowledged, that people felt safe. All of these things were key. And in addition to that was the conversation of different elements, and in particular, fire and water, and the relationship with both of those. And so what you'll see in this garden is a space that is intended to be welcoming and inviting, a safe space, and a space that has these two features of fire and water that are featured. So this is the fire node, an aerial shot from above. It is circular, with pathways coming in and exiting. And again, with the fire area in the center, some seating, and then this this wall around the edge. And then what you see on the background is the landscape bermed up against that wall. So this does feel very nestled inside the landscape, and inside a grove of trees here as well. The fire node itself has a decorative panel system along that wall. And these images, again, came out of those conversations that Dave had with the community as they talked about the relationship with the land, the change of the season, their connection to the land, the connection to seasons, and the plants and wildlife that are associated with that. There is no text on these walls. There is no interpretive. This is not indicative of any one particular First Nation, but instead these are cues and prompts that are meant to start a conversation about the change of season. And the goal here is that when there is ceremony and sacred fire happening here, that whoever is leading that, whether it be an elder or a knowledge keeper, that they see elements from here, and if they choose to share a story that they want to share, that can be picked up from the cues in here, or perhaps even a different story, that this is a safe space to have that conversation. Again, this acknowledgement of the relationship to the land and the change of the season is what's happening here. This is accessible to everyone, and so this is open all the time, and so the public can come and go through here quite regularly. It is a lovely space that is quite impressive when you're in the space. I'm talking a lot about the gardens, but you'll see in the background of a lot of these photos the leaf itself, and I will get to that too. But these key pieces are the things that I wanted to share with you first. The water node, and again, this is an image from earlier in the season. The fire node would be along this pathway just off the bottom of the screen. The pathway from the fire node would lead to what we call the water node. And here is a crescent shape pond, and then a series of spheres. And these spheres represent there's 13 of them. They represent the 13 full moons of the year. 4 large ones represent the 4 seasons. And the space around is intended to be a meadow. So it is in its establishment phase, and we are establishing a tall grass meadow in this space. And so over time, this will grow and become that naturalized area that houses or sort of surrounds the water node space. The spheres themselves, much like the fire node, have a story to tell as well. And each sphere has an engraving on it. And again, similar to the fire node, there is no interpretive telling you what to think or make of what's happening here, but again, indicative of the change of season. So each sphere has an image of some sort that tells you something to do with the change of the season. The final space, or the sixth space of the gardens at the Leaf, is the Grove. And the Grove is essentially an arboretum, a garden of trees. If you've ever been to Winnipeg, you would quickly realize that we have a lot of American elm and a lot of ash trees. And the elms are susceptible to Dutch elm disease, and we have a large monoculture here in the city. And although we don't have a lot of emerald ash borer, we do think that it is coming. And so one of the key things of having an arboretum within the park is to showcase as many different trees that will grow in our climate, that will grow in our zone, and to showcase them as alternatives, whether they be rare or common, and be able to highlight those opportunities while still maintaining a park atmosphere. Because although my role is to focus on the gardens here, we are still a public park, and we still need to make sure that all the facilities within the park and anything that is associated with the park is still accessible. So whether that be bike pathways, pedestrian pathways, open green space, those are all key things that are important to the park. Again, you can see in the background a graphic image of the Leaf. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. So this is the Grove again. This photo is from the depths of the summer drought. You can see again where we irrigate and where we don't. But again, the Grove space is what you see in the foreground. The kitchen garden is right here, almost in the center of the screen. Moving down the path, you can see the amphitheater of the performance garden. The sensory garden is just on the other side here. The seasonal garden on the south end, and the Indigenous Peoples Garden here on the opposite side. With the Leaf acting as the hub of all of this, with all the pathways and connections, sort of connecting you back to the Leaf here. The colors you see on the roof of the Leaf, that's a safety netting. So that is not actually what the roof looks like, but that is just sort of for safety purposes for the construction crew as they install the roof of this facility. So inside the Leaf is, this is under construction. So the other gardens that I just shared with you are open to the public. They're accessible today. They've been there all summer. The Leaf itself is still under construction, and we hope to open at the end of 2022. So just a little over a year to go before we are opening. But within the Leaf is a tropical biome, or tropical conservatory, if you will. I'll be using the word biome to describe the space. This is about a 20,000 square foot facility, again, where we can host a lot of tropical plant material in this tropical biome. There's a large waterfall here where at the time of designing, and I think once constructed, it is the tallest indoor waterfall in North America. And also at the top here, you can see a canopy walkway. And so basically, once you've had your experience in the tropical biome, you can go into the central tower, take the elevator up, and then you can experience the biome again, except from an elevated position. So you're looking down on the canopy. This walkway then leads you into another zone, which is called the Butterfly Garden. And so we have a tropical butterfly garden also associated with this space. This is a key thing for these gardens because as you may recognize, Winnipeg is probably beautiful in the summer, but it's pretty cold in the winter. And so we wanted to make sure that we have a four-season attraction. And although we will make the outdoor gardens an attractive space to be in the wintertime, we also wanted an indoor experience. And so the tropical space will allow us to showcase plant material from around the world. And there's another purpose to this, and I'll get to that too when I start talking about why we've built what we've built and what its purpose is, as all of these spaces act as one unit. Adjacent to the tropical biome, or the tropical room, if you will, is the Mediterranean room. And so this is the Mediterranean biome. And again, while the tropical has plant material, lush plant material from the tropics and subtropics, the Mediterranean biome is representative of plant material from the Mediterranean climate zones. So that would include, of course, the Mediterranean, but also plant material from California or Chile, South Africa, Australia, those Mediterranean climates. This is more of a dry, warm, dry space as opposed to hot, humid. And when it comes to why did we build what we build? Why did we have these different garden zones, whether they're indoor or outdoor? It comes back to this core message that plants are fundamentally important to sustaining human life, and it is our ongoing relationship with plants that shapes and enhances the diverse communities that make up the Canadian identity and helps to unify us as a nation. Now, that's a pretty bold statement to talk about, to say that a garden, that's the role of the garden, or that's what plants play. But if you think about it, regardless of your background, regardless of your economic or social status, or if your ancestors have lived in this country for years, or you're a recent immigrant, no matter who you are, you have a relationship with plants. Maybe it's through the food you eat. Maybe it's through cultural celebrations. Maybe it's how plants are used in the materials we use them for. There's an endless list of connections and relationships with plants. And it is these relationships that we want to share and talk about and showcase. And Winnipeg is a city of about just under 1 million people. So it's a mid-sized city by North American standards. And it is a culturally diverse community. And we want to be able to have a space, have a garden, indoor and outdoor, that celebrates these different cultural communities within our larger community, that people feel that this is a place that they are a part of, that they see themselves in, that makes it a safe space for everyone, a welcoming space for everyone. And that is the core of this garden. That is the core of why we've done what we've done. That is key to all of this. So while the horticulturalist in me loves the plants and wants to keep talking about the plants and the landscape and the design, the reality is we're creating the space that everyone sees themselves as part of. And we do that through a number of different ways in these gardens, whether it be through beauty and expression, so just the sheer beauty of a garden, and that's something that we're all very familiar with, but also health and well-being. There's a sense of calming and health and well-being that goes with being outdoors, being in parks, being in gardens. Of course, food and drink, we've touched on that a little bit, just on sort of our connection with food. That's a very tangible thing that a lot of people can relate to very quickly. Spirituality and consciousness, again, that being part of, being connected to the landscape, that is something that is important to everyone. And sustainability and conservation, which is a core message for the Assiniboine Park Conservancy across the board. And so this is no different between the zoo and of course the horticulture group here and the LEAF, and our efforts to promote and keep in mind sustainability and conservation. So these are sort of the 5 core themes that sort of help support the message that we just talked about. So one of the conservation elements is something that we work on is the Wallami pine. This is this is in our greenhouse facility because the tropical biome isn't quite ready yet. But we have about 4 of these Wallami pines. They're an endangered species from Australia. And there's an interesting story about their discovery in the late 1990s and how specimens have been sent to a number of different botanical gardens across the world just to help preserve the population and enhance it. And so we play a role in that as well. We have 4 in total here. And so what you're seeing in this image is a short video production that we created just to tell that story. The other thing, and if you think about those 5 core themes and that core message that I was talking about, what we did here at the park and in preparing for the Leaf is we reached out to a number of different cultural communities within the city, cultural organizations, and we asked them to help us get in touch with members of their communities on people who they knew were plant lovers, who loved plants, but who may have had an interesting story or something to share about their relationship with plants. And so this is a small collection of the people that we spoke to and asked them to share their stories. Some of them were employees of the park, and some of them were just members of the community at large, all sharing a little bit of their background, a particular plant that is of importance to them, and this connection. And we took those stories with their permission and compiled a small interpretive panel or program where we talk about the plant, we talk about the individual person, and some photos that they would have provided us, some information about the botanical elements of the plant and what it's used for. And we combine that into an interpretive moment, and we will have about 20 to 30 of these spread across the biomes, indoors and outdoors. And so these are moments of interpretation. And again, this is just a concept. So the actual interpretive components that you'll see in the gardens won't quite look like this. But the idea here is that, again, you see yourself, you see someone like you in the garden, and this is their story, and you can relate to it. We received a lot of people sharing their connections, their plant stories. And again, this is one more step to make these gardens a community space, a space where everyone feels that they are part of the space. Another way that we strive to make these connections and get people to tease the story out of people, their own connection, is throughout the gardens. We have about 3 or 4 of these billboards or these little signs, that are called Stories Grow. And we pose a question. And in this particular sign, the question is, how has nature supported you through a challenging time? And remember, this garden opened in the thick of COVID. And what we have here is a small box with some paper and some pencils, and people are encouraged to sit down and write their thoughts. We take those cards and we pin them actually on the back side of this sign. And we have one of these signs that poses a different question in the kitchen garden and another one in the grove. And the response has been overwhelming. People will share very heartfelt, emotional stories. And again, it all connects to nature, to plants, a relationship to the garden, a personal story that they choose to share. And again, it's this idea to get a park visitor, a garden visitor, feel that they are part of the garden, that they are part of this experience, that they are part of this process, that as this garden grows, they are part of it. And that is key to everything about this project. So again, stories grow, love grows, knowledge grows, connections grow, friendships grow, you name it. This is the goal here. This is the raison d'etre of our gardens. These gardens need to be and are more than just a strolling garden to walk through. They are meant to be a place that people feel that they are part of and welcome. And so this is an image from the summer again. Looking up over those ornamental gardens down that central lane, that central promenade. You can see our that sign feature that we were just looking at is here at the entrance. The seasonal garden is featured here. Our amphitheater, our performance garden is right here. Our sensory garden on the right-hand side. The kitchen garden here, just on the north end. The Indigenous Peoples Garden, so the fire node is tucked away in these trees. The water node is just off the screen. And then the grove is just off to the side on the right-hand side. At the center is the leaf, which is the biome spaces. What you see is that these gardens will eventually, once construction is complete, will connect to the leaf itself. The tropical biome is what you see on the left. The Mediterranean is on the right. On the back side of this biome space is a restaurant and washrooms and a classroom. So there is a community space, an educational space that is also associated with this. Again, a facility where people can gather as a community and use this park as essentially a plants community center is really what we're trying to create here. We've converted a number of roads that were for vehicles, and they are now for pedestrians and bikes. So there's been a bit of a slight change in how we use the space and encourage people to get out of their cars and walk the gardens or bike the gardens and be in the space. So I'm going to sort of power through some of these images here, but again, the gardens have their moments of beauty. This is the seasonal garden. Whimsy, again in the seasonal garden, a little swan topiary. This is I talked earlier about the hills and being up on top of the hill and looking out over the garden. This is one of those vantage points. So there's all the elements of the garden that we might be familiar with that are here and are for everyone to enjoy. But there's an opportunity to go deeper and to go richer into these connections. For example, on the backside of the kitchen wall, we talked earlier about the Espalier Wall, which is inside the kitchen, and we're standing on the outside. We had a community group, an arts community group that works with kids, youth program through the summer. We asked them to help paint a mural on this wall. And so they did all of this work off-site. They had their own program. This community group is called Art City. The kids spent the summer working on projects that had to deal with nature and understanding nature and plant material. And then their final project was these drawings and blowing them up to a mural size. And again, I'm just flipping back one image. Then you can see the end product is about just over 100 feet long, or more than that even, of about 30 panels of these graphics. And so again, this will be a very strong statement, especially in the wintertime with all this color here in the garden. But again, it brings the kids' voice into the garden in a way that we never really truly expected at the outset of the project. This is in the fire node, again, with Indigenous partners who are here on a regular basis and sharing conversations and meeting with people in a safe space. Again, this is the whole point of the gardens, is just for community to connect. Our kitchen garden produces a lot of produce, and so our team harvests the produce, and we use it in some of our restaurants. Some of the greens end up at the zoo. Our animal care staff sometimes request some greens, and that roughage is used for some of the animals there. But the bulk of the produce ends up going to local food banks. And that also is a part of our commitment to the community through the garden. Again, it's a very popular space. This is probably, of all the gardens I showed you, this is probably the most popular. This is where people congregate. This is where people meet. This is where people talk. This is where they sit and share. This is a space that people can relate to, and they see things and they walk through and point and see, and you can tell that there is a connection. The garden is a space of art and performance. So this is just outside the performance garden. And so the stage is not meant to be a quiet space and never used. And so we had on our opening weekend, we had a number of different activities and performances happening throughout this space, whether they be musical or dance. That cultural connection, it's another way of celebrating cultural connection. We tried to do it through the plant material, but performance is another way to celebrate that. Of course, we share with the public plant talks, plant conversations. We want to make sure that we still play a role as a horticulture team in connecting with the community, and in this case, just talking about different plants, sensory plants in this case, and again, communicating, sharing, and interacting. Again, we had some other Tai Chi happening in the garden and performance. I don't know if that's really performance, but this also was occurring during our opening celebrations. And again, over the course of the summer, these activations, these elements will be shared. And it's quite possible you could run into this at any time, or probably on any weekend, something happening in the garden.
Gerald, excuse me for interrupting. I'm just letting you know that it is 10 to 8. Lots of questions, but
okay.
This is fascinating. So I hate to even say that.
Okay, I will speed it up and then I'll turn it over to you. Again, just the point here is just these cultural connections. In this case, a demonstration on Ethiopian coffee. This young woman loved engaging with the community and just sharing her knowledge and her connection, in this case, coffee. So I am almost done. This is an image from earlier today. This is again our Assiniboine Park team assembling here at the fire node, and everyone in their orange shirts. Again, this is another meaningful purpose of these gardens, is to be a space of gathering. In the background, you can see the leaf, and then in this case, you can actually see the roof structure is on here. This is an ETFE poly roof, so it's not a glass roof. Glass is on the side, but this is a poly roof structure. And the first question I always get is, can it handle snow? And the answer is yes, it is capable of all of that. But again, just a fall day in the garden, and today especially was a very important day. If you want to know more about the gardens and the project, this is our website, theassiniboinepark.ca, the Leaf Welcome Vision. There's lots of information there. There's even a fly-through video that will give you sort of a fly-through experience, virtual experience of the leaf, the actual building, and the gardens themselves. And with that, Kath, that's my last slide. I can stop sharing if you want, or we can leave this slide up, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Gerald, and thank you so much for this insightful presentation on the gardens and the creativity demonstrated in ensuring sustainability, inclusivity, protection of our natural and cultural landscape. I think the leaf is truly inspirational. We see it there and can't wait to visit it. And the fact that it will open during Canada's Year of the Garden 2022. And I think this opportunity to inform our guests that 2022 will be Canada's Year of the Garden. And I think this garden can be seen as a legacy of that year, and another beautiful garden on Canada's garden route across our beautiful country. And so at this point, I will turn it over to Kat, because we have a lot of questions. And I know one question I wanted to ask was, the role of this garden within Winnipeg. How does that come about, or how do you see that role?
Well, it is key to being a community space. And so the role of this garden is to ensure that the community feels that they are part of it and not excluded from it. The park itself needs to be a four-season place of gathering. And so every element within these gardens needs to play a role in that, needs to participate in that.
Kat, I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. So many questions. So let's start with a question from Margaret. How do you protect the gardens from spring flood of the river?
So that's a good question. We are just slightly out of the floodplain of the river, of the Assiniboine River. And so I've been here for about 10 years. We've never had the park itself have a flood. So we are protected in that sense. The riparian forest, which is the forest edge, does receive a lot of damage over the years for seasonal flooding, but this part of the garden is still protected in that sense. Whereas we sit just slightly higher than the sort of that 50-year flood line.
Okay. Dennis is asking, what items are going to be seen immediately when open, and what sort of things are planned to be seen more in the future? Something that might take longer to come to fruition.
Well, one of the things here is, if you look at this image that's on the screen, it's an open, sunny space. So what's going to take some time is for the trees to fill in and do their thing. And that's so everyone, myself included, needs a little bit of patience to watch the garden grow. So that's the outdoor spaces, is watching them grow. The activation and engagement component. So the images I showed at the end of the presentation there of activities happening, that's intended to grow over time. That's intended to be the garden experience, in addition to just appreciating the plants themselves. Once inside the leaf, again, it's the same thing. A lot of plant material will need some time to sort of fill the space, fill the room. So that is one of the key things to watch for over time, is watching these plants grow and sort of take over their space.
Will you be practicing crop rotation in your kitchen garden?
Yes, absolutely. And probably some of the beds will also will have sort of nitrogen fixers. So there probably might be 1 or 2 beds every year that maybe is just clover, or just, something just sort of rejuvenate the bed for that particular year. But crop rotation would be key to the space as well.
Okay, so a long question from Dean. This seems like a tremendous addition of high maintenance garden to what was essentially open lawn area. Has staff been expanded in a way that will ensure this landscape gets maintained adequately? So often the operation of new landscapes means that other existing landscapes suffer.
Mm-hmm. The intention is, of course, to maintain this space. There was an older conservatory on site, and so again, we do have the capacity to maintain the biome space, and then the seasonal staff has been increased to maintain the outdoor gardens as well. So when we say we were planning the garden, we also are planning the team who's going to take care of that garden.
There's a couple of questions about the garden's recycling practices.
Yeah, so the garden is sort of, we're talking a lot about the garden, but we're also part of the park and zoo as a whole. So the waste stream of the entire space, the entire 400 acres, is sort of a collective, if you will. So there is a recycling program in terms of any type of waste that visitors have, so recyclables and such. In terms of the greens here, we do have a composting facility, and then and that's handled by our zoo partners. So it's sort of transporting material over is the role here for us.
What year, asks Marlene, was the original garden established, and where do you get the bulk of your operating budget?
So the garden, well, the park was a turn of the century park, so around 1900, 1905. And various gardens that we showed, and the zoo itself, sort of developed over the past 125 years. And so that's the history of the park. When the park was built, it was sitting well outside the city of Winnipeg. Now it's within the city, of course. So that's the history of the park. It's also sort of an Olmstedian style of park, and Olmstedian is similar to the style of park of Mount Royal or Central Park. A lot of major cities had major parks built at that time. It's the City Beautiful movement. So again, the layout of the park sort of reflects that time frame or that era. In terms of budget, we operate at an arm's length from the city. So the city of Winnipeg supports us to a degree with operating. Our zoo is admission-based. The Leaf building will be admission-based. we have a number of restaurants and catering venue and venues for event venues throughout the park. So we do operate a lot of those. And I have to admit, the city, the people of Winnipeg, the population here have also been very generous with donations in terms of helping the space operate and be built. So those things combined is what formulates the operating budget of the site.
Okay, so someone was asking the revenue stream and operating, so that would answer that. Okay, someone's asking the name of the consultant for the Aboriginal garden. That's Nicole.
So it was a team, and there were 3 of them. So there was a father-daughter team, so Dave Thomas and his daughter Cheyenne Thomas. And then the 3rd member of the team, her name is Mamie Griffith. And all 3 are from Manitoba, and all 3 they're actually trained architects is what is really their background, but they heard about this project. Once we described this project to them, they took it to a new level of interpretation and design from their perspective, and they led a great process. They were part of this process from the beginning, and I don't know if anyone out there is part of a team that's working on working with First Nations or working with Indigenous designers, but is the only way to do it, because it's and they have expressed that to me multiple times, because the worst thing for any person who you ask for their creative input and ask that at the late hour, the 11th hour, as an afterthought, it never goes over very well. And so with them on board early on, so many things that they had to share and incorporate, actually, there's moments of that throughout the whole project, not just in the Indigenous Peoples Garden.
Okay, we're at 8 o'clock, but if you don't mind, Gerald, can we keep going for 10 minutes?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Dorothy's asking, do you have volunteers helping in any way?
There is a volunteer program. And again, this is part of the global Assiniboine Park Conservancy program. So some volunteers, they focus on the zoo. Some focus on our education programs. And we are developing a volunteer program for the horticulture, for the gardens, and the leaf in particular. And so that will launch next year. And we're super excited to have volunteers as part of this, because that's another community engagement component of the gardens.
Eunice says, I now understand that there are proposed gardens. Will we see any part of the actual garden? I'm not sure.
Sorry, I missed that.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Eunice. I'm not quite sure if you want to retype your question. I'm not understanding it. Dorothy Wilson's asking, how long from inception to completion of the LEAF project?
Oh, that's a good question. That's my favorite one. I've been with the park for about 10 years, and the Conservancy is about just over 10 years. It's about 12 years old, so the nonprofit organization, and they were tasked with 3 things. One was to redevelop the heart of the park. So that was one of the elements of the heart of the park was the children's nature playground that you saw, and there were some other components that I haven't talked about. The second was a redevelopment of the zoo, and so the zoo has been changed quite a bit, and is now focusing on northern species, so polar bears and muskox and caribou, as opposed to elephants and giraffes. So a shift on the relevancy of the zoo. And the third piece of the project of the redevelopment of Assiniboine Park was this horticultural facility. So to answer your question, this is the 3rd phase of a 3-phase program of the entire park redevelopment. This is at least 10 years in the making. Construction for this particular project began in 2017. And so the design work was happening in the years prior to that. So in my 10 years here, this has always been a project on my task list. Obviously now it's a big part of my task list, but it's always been an active project.
You showed a beautiful picture of the the murals on the fencing, on the panels. Jim and Nora are asking, what are those panels made of?
So the wall is a concrete wall. The panels are actually, they're very simple. They're plywood, and they're just mounted on. They're aluminum. They're mounted onto the wall, and then yeah, it's just 30 some odd panels just mounted to the wall.
Okay, so someone, Mary, oh no, hold on, where did it go? Quite fun. So Linda says, I've been away from Winnipeg for a while. What happened to the old conservatory and the plants there?
Yes. So the old conservatory, basically we did a feasibility study. It was a small conservatory, a small building, as far as conservatories go. And it just was past its lifespan. It was not something that could be, I guess, function sustainably going forward. So the decision was made to build a new facility. And so that's what we call the LEAF. The plant material in the old conservatory was dated at best and not in the best condition because the roots of most of the plant material was all intertwined with each other. So it was difficult to preserve any in particular tree. All of the trees, because the old conservatory was relatively short, it was about 40 feet tall. This new facility is twice as tall, but because of its height, every tree was cut back every year. We would top off every tree in that conservatory. So the specimens weren't of the best quality. Anything that could be preserved, we brought over to the zoo, to our tropical house, which we call Toucan Ridge. And so a lot of the tropical material made its way over there. And so it did have a second life in that facility. If it couldn't have been transplanted, then we couldn't salvage that material. There were some small specimens of particular plants that our team did keep. So we have a small Norfolk pine and some vanilla orchids that we did keep from the old conservatory, but that's the story of what happened to the old facility.
Okay, I have to tell you that there's been lots of great feedback on the Indigenous Garden and the celebration of our first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation that was held there. So that is amazing. Just a couple more questions. So Margaret's asking, is this a net zero energy use facility?
It's not net zero, but there are a number of features of this facility that are very key to point out. So there is geothermal heating, which is part of this whole mechanical system. The other thing that's key to note here is the central tower in the middle acts as a big, I guess, vent. So there's passive air flowing through air ducts that come into this facility and then pass out through essentially the chimney, I guess, at the central tower. So because it's this passive air system, that is an energy efficient way of heating and cooling the space. The other element here is when you look at the image on the screen, we are looking north. So basically what I'm trying to say is all of the plant material in the biomes face south. On the north face of the building, which is on the opposite side, there's a large berm, a big hill that sort of envelops and folds into the building. And so what that does is it protects the north face of the building from cold winds. So there is sort of some elements of placement and design of the facility itself that sort of play into making it a much more efficient space, because it is a large building. It houses tropical material, so it does need to be warmed throughout the winter months. So it does require a lot of energy, but a number of steps have been taken to reduce the requirement of energy needed to facilitate that.
Okay, thank you. Could you provide some examples of the plant material in the Indigenous Garden?
The Indigenous Garden, so the four key plants that are focused on, that we are trying to grow here are sage, cedar, wild rice, and a number of different wild grasses. And so we're trying to reestablish the meadow there with those tall grass prairies. So those are key things. There is no tobacco grown here on site, but that is one of the sacred plants that it is also key to the Indigenous community. The challenge we have with establishing the meadow is it will take time to have it fully become the meadow that it's intended to be. The space has been full of thistle over years, and so now we're trying to transition and manually pull out lots and lots of thistle every season to sort of turn this over into a more proper meadow space.
Fantastic. Final question from me here. Someone's commenting, and there's lots of people talking about how great a sense of community that the LEAF has. Do you provide any instructional programs for kids and adults?
Yeah, so we have what we call our programming and events team. And so the programming team is responsible for delivering educational programs. Now again, this is part of our global team. So they also provide the same service in the zoo, but they do have a classroom in the LEAF. And so there'll be an indoor and outdoor classroom. The kitchen has a demonstration kitchen. So the goal here is that our programming team is delivering both adult and youth related programming that's curriculum based, that's also leisure based. And so as we showed a lot of those community aspects, the idea of having workshops and programs and youth programs in the garden, in the LEAF itself is key to its success. So there is a dedicated team who's responsible for that as well.
That is fantastic. Now, thank you for answering all those questions we've peppered with. For all the people who've been asking, and there are some people who are saying hello to you and sharing comments, just so you know that I will share with Gerald all the comments in the chat so he can see all the great things that you're saying about the garden. Right now, though, I'm handing it back to Michelle. Hey, Michelle.
I forgot to put my mic on. There you go. And there you go. So thank you. On behalf of Kath and on behalf of the Canadensis Botanical Garden Society and all the participants this evening, I extend a very sincere thank you to you, Gerald, for your wonderful presentation. And as we could see and read in the chat room, this presentation was truly appreciated by all of those present, and we saw the amount of questions. So now, of course, like many of our participants tonight said, I look forward to visiting this wonderful new garden, the LEAF, and everything around it. And I'm certain that, you know, I saw there in the chat, many people are already planning and want to go. And I certainly hope that, you know, we can do something special within the year of the garden, and it certainly be great addition to Canada's garden route, and that we celebrate in this country. And so, yes, I encourage all of you tonight that were there to visit when you can, or to visit the website and get a lot more information. So, merci beaucoup. Gerald, it was a great presentation and well appreciated.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Our next presentation is on the 28th of October, and we will be visiting the Duzen Botanical Garden in Vancouver. So from Winnipeg all the way out to Vancouver. And as of registration for that event will open this evening, once we close this presentation, and Kat has arranged all of that.
Oh, it opened at 8 p.m. So
oh, it opened at 8 p.m. Okay, so there you go. It's already open. So because we went a little bit over time. Okay. We invite you to visit, we also invite you to visit Canadensis website, where you can learn more about our plans for the Garden of Canada, and sign up for our newsletter, and or you can become a member. I mean, if it's Canada's garden, it's open to, of course, we want all Canadians involved. The sense of community that Gerald was talking about. And of course, you can also make a donation. As a registered charity and not-for-profit organization, we heavily rely on generous donation for this on the yearly operation and the planning and contracts in order to get the Canadensis Botanical Garden built. And you can also follow us on Facebook, and you can like us. And so thank you for your participation
Michelle,
and support.
can I
Yes,
jump in just for 1 second to
Sure.
remind people, if you're in Ottawa, this Saturday is the Canadensis Hay Day, and we have events going on from noon until 6 p.m. Hay rides, there are some nature walks, there are site walks, just so you can really experience the Canadensis site. And our closing event is at 5 p.m. We have, it's called Feel the Heartbeat, and we are working with the company Indigenous Experiences. This is a great family event. You will be out under the trees playing, you know, Indigenous rattles, learning a song, and, you know, being in nature and learning from the two hosts about the connection of Indigenous people to the Canadensis land.
Yes, thank you. And while we're at it, I'd also like to say, because in Ottawa, I am president of Gardens Ottawa, and we have created the Garden Promenade, and the Canadensis Botanical Garden site is on the Garden Promenade, and we do have self-guided tours that you can go on the website and discover. And the leaves will be changing in Ottawa, and so you can enjoy the beautiful colors of our gardens here on the Garden Promenade. So yes, there's always plenty to do. So thank you, Kat, for facilitating and organizing all of this. Again, thank you, Gerald, for being there and sharing your beautiful garden space. And thank you to all the participants that have joined us. And we look forward to meeting with you again on the 28th of October to be in Vancouver. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thanks, Gerald. Good night. Good night,
Good
everybody.
night. Thank you.